back to the Parmjeet and Pradeep show. Parmjeet, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited about today's topic. I think you have an interesting article that you wanted to chat about today.
Yes, I was actually not rifling, I was flipping through Harvard Business Review this morning, and it came upon this very interesting bit of information about who makes more money, the one who is concentrated on job or the one who is following his or her calling. So, what brings you the dough? Does calling brings you more dough? Does it bring you satisfaction than somebody who is simply trying to do a job? So it was interesting, actually.
So, just for maybe some of the Punjabi audience out there that don't fully understand calling, um, how would you describe that?
Calling to me is where that you would do it even if there were no money involved. It's a very idealistic thing, and you will notice many people start their business not because they are interested in business. Sorry, they are not interested in the money that comes out of business, but because they are good at it. They this is where they gravitate towards. This is something they would do even otherwise.
Mm.
If all other conditions are met, they will do it otherwise. Means people drop out of schools, people drop out of jobs, they build up their own business. And I think you are one prototypical example here. Means if I recall our conversations, that you used to be in a corporate job, and then one of your aim was to corporate CEO, and then the bug of calling, I think, I suspect, bit you, and then you took a kind of a detour. To me, that would constitute a calling, something you would do regardless of whatever the benefits of that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah, I did get bit hard, which was good because it's something I don't regret. But I see it exactly just as you have pointed out. It's something that's deeper. There's a deeper meaning. There's a deeper purpose behind it. There's a feeling of maybe even attraction or magnetism um, behind your calling. So, Parmji, what did you come about in this article?
So this is something these researchers, I think this is a synopsis of a book, and it is about whether people actually for the love and the money. That's the title in the Harvard Business Review, and that is actually January February 2022's edition. So that's pretty
Really
much
recent.
fresh uh, out the oven. And what they wanted to see is that this is a more like, I think I've heard this, and you may have heard it, and many people heard that people often who are driven by calling often end up doing better in the long scheme of thing, not in the short scheme of thing.
Hmm.
Because if the short scheme of thing, they might be actually working without any kind of financial uh, derivatives and financial incentive, but because the kind of work they do and the effort they put and the committed they are, that oftenly attract that kind of financial investment, and oftenly they do end up actually in the better place. And not only that, they often have a higher satisfaction, life satisfaction, which is oftenly elusive if somebody is just only doing 9 to 5 job. Hmm. So in order to test this, they went through a kind of interesting survey, which was called Wisconsin Longitudinal Study. So forgive me, I'm reading it so that I do not mess up the information. Wisconsin Longitudinal Study, which collected information on thousands of high school graduate, um, and and those who described their calling, they said that this is their calling, their work as a calling. And they noticed that it started around 2004, and they noticed that these individuals who called their work as calling, uh, they were they were more they they earned more in that year, even after all other factors were accounted for, like socioeconomic status, demographics, employment related characteristics. So these individuals who thought that their work is their calling, they in fact ended up earning more in 2004. But then they surveyed them again in 2011, and the pattern held up. Even after 7 years, these people in a way continue to outperform the individuals who were just doing a job. So
Mm.
ultimately, the gist of the study is that individuals who follow their calling end up doing better, not only in the financial terms, but also on the life satisfaction.
That is very interesting, and I think maybe there's something to do with COVID too, because I know they talk about the Great Resignation as well, and I'm wondering if the study was prompted from that, or maybe it was done. Was it done prior to COVID?
No, it's published around this time.
Yeah, and I would say so from my personal experience, I would say that that is genuinely true. And I'm going to talk about myself, but also because I work with hundreds of men and entrepreneurs, is that this is relatively true for the men that I see. The ones that aren't happy, the ones that aren't fulfilled in life, the ones that truly feel like there's something missing are the ones that don't feel, or the ones that feel like they don't have a calling, like they've missed their calling, or they can't identify it, or even, for example, a lot of entrepreneurs, their calling they feel is their business, and then when they sell their business or transition into retirement, they lose that calling, and then they feel like they're lost again. So I can say within my own confidence that I would say that study seems to be fairly accurate.
Yeah, and it's just a kind of a information bit here. This is actually going to be published in an Academy of Management journal. It is forthcoming, so I will go search out where it is, and then maybe one of the forthcoming episodes we can unpack this more. But ultimately, the gist of the study is that people who think of their work as calling, they often do end up doing well. Um,
Mm,
which oftenly sometimes is counterintuitive because if you have a kind of family conversations, we often don't, especially in the Indian context, South Asian context, we don't encourage people, or let me rephrase it, we are not oftenly encouraged to follow a calling. We often encourage get a job, नौकरी लभ ला जिस च चार पैसे होणगे.
yeah. Yep.
And that's why if you see why a lot of Indian and Pakistani and Bangladeshi, they end up in medicine and engineering and law, because these are the three fields which are, interestingly enough, they give a kind of give an impression of security and financial viability. Even
Mhm.
though I think as an entrepreneur, you can argue for this that you can make a lot more money out of these in a different way, but
Mm.
it is an impression that everybody thinks that if you become a doctor, you are set for the rest of life. So that's, to me, means that I have worked with medicine students, and we see they suffer from the same thing everybody else suffer, because once you are in a kind of a profession, um, the quantum of money you make is going to get normalized.
Mhm.
It's not, and because you are going to start moving around in the same kind of people who have the similar kind of money.
Mhm.
And if you don't have any distinguishing uh, emotional investment into the work you are doing, sooner or later you are going to burn out.
Yep.
And I
That's
think, if I may add, calling is a kind of antidote to that kind of burnout that come from a high intensity jobs, which may bring a lot of dough or money on the other way.
yeah. I
So please go ahead.
Oh, I was just but I completely agree with you because I think so. A number of things popped up, RMG. One was I remember before my dad passed away, probably the same year that he did, he had a conversation with my brother who was in the corporate world and working at a bank and working his his butt off. I was doing very well. My dad said, money's not everything. You got a family. You got to, take care of yourself. You, Life is about living it to the fullest. And it's really interesting for my dad to say that because my dad always pushed us to have strong careers. He always wanted me to be a doctor. It was the hardest thing for me to be able to break to my parents that I was leaving. I was in biochemistry before and I switched over to business. And it was a big disappointing moment for them, but I think this is a lesson for all the parents out there, all the Indian parents, right, Punjabi parents, all the Asian parents out there. and everybody else who's listening, is that when we try to force our kids to go down a specific route in some way, shape, or form, it's not the best thing for them. If we truly want them to perform at their best, I think they should be able to find their own calling, regardless of whether they make a ton of money or not. But this study shows that, or it actually infers that if you do have a calling, that you're more likely to make money. Is there a correlation there, Parmjeet?
It says that there's a sides to that. This is one thing they've noticed, that people end up making more than others that year, and that when they started in 2004 and 2011, that the pattern has held up. That it means individuals who thought their work was calling, they ended up making more than others. But there's a side note to this uh, kind of a study. And what is that? It's oftenly not because these people are good at what they do. Usually, when we look at people who pursue their calling, we look at them in slightly differently than individuals who just do their job. We think of people who follow their calling slightly of a better species than than individuals who just do their 9 to 5. That perception, according to this observation, according to this study, is what led the managers to give more hefty bonuses to these individuals. So this is actually an interesting footnote to the whole thing, that calling is because it's perceived to be of a higher quality nature of higher quality, and that's why it gets you more money in the sense, or especially if you are employed. I don't think I can make a comment on if this is true for entrepreneurs, but I suspect we know from other studies that people who follow uh, their calling, they often have a higher satisfaction in the long term. So one thing to very be important, we need to say here, that there's a difference between short term and long term.
Mhm.
Sometimes people who pursue their calling may end up being poor in the short term because they are
Mhm.
like startup people who do startups. Sometimes they can get drive into debt because they have to actually invest all those things. Or sometimes the calling is such that it does not bring you enough immediate financial incentives, but in the long term these people end up actually doing better. uh,
Mhm.
if you look at this study in the context of other studies, what we know, uh, and then the reason why life satisfaction is better for these individuals, because they are not in for money to begin with. So in some ways money is a kind of a not such important part of the whole process anyway for these individuals, as long as they're able to pay their bills and do whatever they need to do. And because they are attracted by a bigger picture of their life, life satisfaction come from that part.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said. So originally, when you were saying that they get paid more, I was thinking, okay, yeah, people that are working in their calling actually perform better. But in this study suggesting that there's a perception, almost a stereotype of individuals that leads a manager to say this person maybe deserves more, their performance is better because it's part of their calling. We see this person doing the work that seems to be their calling. So that's really interesting. Um, I'd like
Uh,
to see. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, but I don't think we can read too much into it, because this is a data which is very specific,
Mhm,
uh, and I would suspect that one of the reason why managers think there's perception, it could be a variety of reasons. It could be that person is really good at what he or she does, you
mhm,
know. But it also is possible that when somebody is moved by something higher, we often attach more value to that,
mhm,
especially when somebody say, I am not in this for money,
mhm,
and suddenly our perception of that work and that individual who does that work actually changes. Uh,
mhm,
and that perception could lead it, but I don't think I would like to read too much into it, what exactly that. But my suspicion, and considering other studies which are available, that people who have a higher satisfaction in life, people are happier in what they work, means from a separate studies, they actually end up doing better in the long scheme. People earn better.
mhm.
those are
Yeah,
those are not a study related to this one, but specifically this was what it was, what we spoke about that.
I think this is a really relevant topic for our culture, because it takes me back again to my youth where my parents, I wanted to be a veterinarian originally. I think you and I had a conversation about this previously, and they're like, "Yeah, you're going to be a dunga doctor, right? That's that's not there's no real status to that. The reputation isn't that great. You got to be a medical doctor. You got to be a physician." Uh, and so that was interesting because that deterred me off that path, and I felt a sense of loyalty. I felt a sense of duty to my parents to become a doctor, but it wasn't until my fourth year that I said, I'm just miserable. I just remember walking. I was at UBC at that time, massive campus, and walking to one of my classes, and I was just like, this is just not for me. I just couldn't do it. So I switched over into the business program. But again, this is for the audience, for the generation. You have kids that are coming up, whether they're in high school or they're in university or college. I think it's important to take a look and encourage our kids to explore their calling. And this is something that we do when we advise business families in business, because one of the natural things for a business family is to want to have the next generation be part of the business, right? Because if I build this empire, I don't want to just sell it or give it away at the end of the day. I want my kids to be taking over. That's a natural thing. But that doesn't mean that they actually do. That doesn't mean that they feel like that's their calling. And a lot of times we force our kids into the business, Parmjeet, and it doesn't work out well because they may not have the passion, they may not have the drive, they might not even have the skills, right, to be able to do it.
Yeah, it means I can recall a lot of my acquaintances and even some friends who have college going kids even falling into that trap because we try to lay out foundations for our kids. And I don't blame people especially immigrant families who gravitate toward medicine and law and uh, other professions which ensure some financial security over the period of time. But I think if that would be true for the first generation immigrant family, if you're struggling,
Mhm.
I would be okay with that kind of argument. But if you are a third generation immigrant and you have pretty much good financial security and you're pushing your kids into the way of your own understanding, I think that's a kind of a that's missing the point by byte margin.
Mhm.
Means I often, one of my kids, our kids, is actually graduating high school this year, and this is the question I often asked at McMaster because I teach certain course. One of the courses I teach is called professional transition. So they would say, though, what would you tell your kid? And I will tell them that I will tell exactly what I told you. I don't tell them anything. I tell them that, if you try to pursue something where you can build your life around, if you are
Mhm.
artistic by nature, can you monetize your artistic nature in a way that you can build a life around? Can you think of yourself as an individual who can build a life which is not dependent upon the salary of someone else?
Mhm.
That you can set up a shop, you can build up a business, you can be a startup, you can be entrepreneur, or you can be employable, but you are not simply putting all your eggs in one basket, because then your employability also means dependability,
Mhm.
or dependence, not dependability. Because if I need to be employed, it means I need to have a dependence on somebody else. And the moment, um, as good as an employee I can be, I am still dependent upon the generosity and the goodwill of somebody giving me the salary.
Mhm.
So salaries are most interesting part of the conversation. Actually, salaries, we don't even think that salary is the biggest symbol of economic slavery, because we are so dependent upon that month to
Mhm.
month. We build our life, we build our debt around that.
Mhm.
Um, Anyhow, Matt, that can be conversation. Then can be part of the conversation in a different segment. But this is what I will tell my kids, that you know let them explore. They are in a wonderful country where chances of you messing up is quite low, unless you do some real bad stuff. um, so you have the opportunity, and you can just allow your kids to follow their calling, support them. And a happy kid in the long scheme is a good investment a parent can do, because you don't want their kids when they're 50 complaining to you that my life has been messed up by you because you wanted me to live in a certain way. I don't think that's a nice thing I would like to hear from my kids.
Mm. And even if you don't hear, your kids may be thinking that.
Yeah,
So
think
that's
yeah, they may be nice not to tell you, but they will show up. you know
mhm.
and I don't want that. I want my our kids to actually explore it and follow whatever they want. We will support them, we will guide them, of course, what our responsibilities are. And that's what I will tell my students, that I will not tell anything to you which I'm not willing to tell my own kids.
Well, I think that's a great way to come to a conclusion for this episode, Parmjeet. Is there any last words that you want to share with the audience?
I would, again, I think it's a reiteration of our whole conversation, is that if you're especially South Asian parents, if you have kids and they're at a stage when they're thinking of careers and professions, encourage them to explore and be curious, encourage them to build a life rather than to devote their time on a job.
Mhm.
uh, Encourage them to be independent, encourage them to, if they can, monetize their hobbies and good habits, because then you are independent.
Yeah, and based on the article that you're talking about, there's a high likelihood that they might actually make more money too. So, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. It's I think because money is not important for these folks, so even less amount of money will make them more satisfied. So for a parent, what greater joy to have your kid satisfied.
Hmm. Yep, great point. So, thank you, Parmjeet. That was a great episode. I learned a lot here today. Thank you. And for those of you out there watching, thank you very much. We appreciate you tuning into our show. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe to this channel, and share with your network. And we will catch you next time.
Thank you, Pradeep, and thank you, folks.
Take care.